Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. G again, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to cut glass, because I know I've mentioned that in the last couple videos, and today we're going to take a look at how glass cutters work and how we cut glass and what we do to the glass to make it fit into the big stained glass panel. Okay. Instead of cutting the glass, instead of showing you on some of the real glass, I'm going to show you how we cut it using just a cheap piece of clear glass here, and that'll be easy for you to see, and then we'll just talk about some of the things that we do to the glass to get it ready. Okay. So the first thing I want to show you is what a glass cutter looks like. Okay, so there's two different kinds of glass cutters. This one is kind of an old-fashioned kind. A lot of people like to use it, and you just hold it. You use a pencil. This one's a little different. It's called a pistol grip, and when you cut the glass, it just gives you a different angle on it. This one has oil inside of it, because what happens is the oil comes in and comes down and helps the cutting part stay sharper longer. Okay, when we look at the tips of these glass cutters, we can see that it looks like there's a little wheel down there in the end. Okay, and they're not sharp. These wheels aren't sharp at all. They aren't going to ever cut you, but they do affect the glass when we cut the glass. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this one and show you exactly how we would cut the glass. So now here's a piece of just plain old clear glass. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a straight line across it, and you'll get a chance to hear what that sounds like, because it makes a kind of an interesting sound when we cut the glass. So I'm just going to go straight across, and you can hear that it makes a little scritchy sound. Okay, and it doesn't cut the glass in half, but it makes a line that's kind of a weak place. And then what we do is we help that weak place break all the way through. And I have this special pair of pliers, and what they have inside of them is they have two bumps on the outside and one bump in the middle. Okay, and when we squeeze something with them, it makes it bend kind of this way. So what I do is I take this line and I line it up with that little scratch mark that I made, that little weak place, and then I very gently squeeze, and the glass just breaks right in half, right where I made the line. Okay, and then glass likes to break in straight lines. It doesn't like to make really sharp corners, but you can cut very gentle curves. Okay, so I'm going to make a little gentle curve now, and we'll see what that's like. Okay, so we have a nice gentle curve there. Same thing, I'm going to use these pliers. I'm going to line them up with the scratchy part, the scratchy line, and it just breaks right in half. It just follows that weak place in the glass. Okay, so that's how that works with this kind of glass. I'm using all different kinds of glass in your panels. You can see some of it has kind of a rough texture, some of it's kind of a bumpy texture, some of it's smooth. Some of the glass is shiny on both, or very smooth on both sides like this glass was, but most of it has some kind of texture on at least one side of it. Okay. Now what happens when, here's our pattern, and what happens when we want to cut a piece and use it on the real glass. Because this is all pinned down, I can't use this. I have to figure out a way to get a piece of that shape to glue it onto a piece of the glass, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I just take a piece of tracing paper, and let's say I want to do this tree trunk, and I want to cut that right now. Now usually I don't pick a piece out of the middle. Usually I have to kind of build as I go along, but I'll just do this today just to show you how this works. So I would take a piece of tracing paper, and I'd literally trace it. I just go right over it, and I just trace the piece that I want to cut. I try to keep it still. And then I always write either F on it or front. So I can tell the front of the piece from the back, because sometimes they look so much alike, I don't know which side to glue down. So then I cut this out, being really careful to cut it very carefully. Now I'm not going to cut this out of the real glass. I'm just going to cut it out of the clear glass, just to show you for a demonstration. Okay, so that side says front. So I want to put the glue on the back. I'm just going to make a clear tree out of this glass that I cut already. What I always do too is whenever I cut glass, I always brush, because if there's teeny little pieces of glass that are ended up on here, they might break this piece. So it says front there, so I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to do just a glue stick, just like you use in school, And then, just like the teachers always tell you, we don't want to cut out of the middle of anything like construction paper. We always want to save as much as we can, so we try to cut things from near the edges. And now it's glued onto the piece of glass. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before when I was just making demonstration lines. I start here at the side. This paper tends to curl a little bit. And I make a little curve that way. And then I'll cut that in half, break it in half. And then I just go around the piece of paper as my guide, because it's glued down. You can hear the little scritch as I go. And another one going that way. Okay, so I tried to keep my cutting lines right up against where the pattern piece is. And then I have another pair of pliers that I use all the time, and all I have to do is just break it like that and drop it in my glass bucket. And this piece, I think I'm going to use this pair of pliers again, and it breaks it right off. Okay. Now, very often when glass breaks, you might get some little bumps that you don't expect, or maybe it doesn't break exactly the way you want. And when that happens, we have a way to fix that without having to cut the whole piece over again. And I have a glass grinder. And this is what's called a glass grinder. So there are two cutting heads. This is about an inch apart, an inch across, and it's not going to cut you, but it just feels kind of rough like sandpaper. And then there's a 1/4 inch grinder up here to grind smaller places. So what I do is I turn the grinder on, and then I keep the pattern piece on there so I can grind right up to it. And you can see there's water spraying, and the water sprays because the grinding head doesn't wear down as fast if there's water spraying on it. So these grinders are made to have water in them, and it means everything gets wet. So this is soaking wet, but that's okay because I've already done the grinding. I take off the paper, and then I use a paper towel usually, because there's still kind of some glue on there. So I just wipe it off and wipe it clean, get the glue part off. And then I have all these old towels, and I make sure it's completely dry so it doesn't get my pattern all wet. And then I can put it on here and check to make sure it's the right fit. Okay, and normally I would try to fit it right up against the piece next to it, and so that I might have to grind it a little more to make it fit perfectly. Okay, this isn't done yet though, because even though it fits right and it's in the right place, you can see that these have the foil around them, and now I can handle this and it's not going to cut me. And usually what I have now is I have this copper foil, and it's got a backing on it, so it's the black part is really super sticky, and we want that because then what we have to do is lay it in there really carefully so it's even on both sides, so the glass goes right down the middle, and press it on there, and then undo this. And I had to do this with every single piece that I've done so far. We have to do this with every piece so that they can be connected to the piece next to them in a permanent way. And I'm just going to pinch that so I can hold it there. And then we keep going around. And usually I don't, this is kind of a spare piece of copper foil. Usually I don't waste very much, so I keep it to use it again. And I make sure it fits like that. Then I use this piece of plastic. It's just like a rubbing tool, and I use it to press down the copper foil so that it sticks on the sides and the edges. So you can see how that looks really nice and flat. Then I just go boop over the edge, and I make sure it's all down nice and tight, and then this side has to go down nice and tight. And this sticks really tight and it doesn't come off. And now we can see that that can go there and fit in with all the other pieces. Okay, so that's typically what I do. I go piece by piece by piece all the way across, and you can't just go. You have to fit one next to the other, so you have to kind of go in order, and you want to get that in order. I will show you one quick piece to cut, and here's a piece of chartreuse green glass, and I'm going to cut the birdhouse shape out of that. Let's see if I can. And you can see I already cut the the tracing paper piece, and I glued it down here. And now let's see if we can make this work. I usually do my cutting on the over here. I think I'm going to do my cutting over here just because it's a little bit more of a better angle. And see, I put it really near the edge because I don't want to waste any glass. And I'm going to flip it this way because with being right-handed, I think this will be easier to go. And I'm not going to go all the way across. I'm going to make a nice gentle curve. Okay, so there we have our scratch line. And I'll come back over here and get my pliers. And we do a little pinch. And then that broke off. And then all I have to do now is just go right around this piece from edge to edge. So I start on the edge of the glass and I go all the way to another edge, because glass wants to keep going. We don't want to just make a mark just in the middle. And then we go this way and follow the curves. And then this way. Now I have a little bump there. I'm just going to kind of ignore that for now because I can take care of that with my grinder. Okay, so those are those pieces. And now I just pull these or break these. It's just a gentle tug. This is a longer one here. I'm going to go this way. Okay, and now this piece is ready to go on the grinder. And sometimes it takes a while to grind it smooth so it fits, but now it's ready to grind. You can see there's some really sharp places there. Sometimes the glass just breaks that way. There's not a stained glass person anywhere who hasn't cut themselves. So I have Band-Aids here, and it's always something to be prepared for when you're doing stained glass. One other thing I wanted to show you, I know you've seen the spring panel that's done. Because this is done, and I have to work between here and my light table and over here, I want to really protect this, because the last thing you want is to have a nasty accident and drop something. So I have this kind of thick paper, and I cover up the spring panel so that nothing drops on it accidentally and gives us a headache of having to fix a piece of it. So I cover it up to protect it, and as soon as I finish the summer piece, I'll cover that up and protect it, and as I move on down the line. Anything else? I'm trying to think if I forgot anything.
I was wondering about the fractions that you have written down. You've got some fractions on there?
Yeah, I have some fractions on here because the window we have to fit it into, it has to fit perfectly with just a little bit of wiggle room. So I had to measure super, super carefully how big the panel has to be. The trick is that there's going to be, I think we talked a little bit about this, there's going to be this zinc that has to go on the edge here as extra strength for the panel. It's 1/8 of an inch deep, and the part that the zinc that I'm using is 1/2 inch zinc. So I have to measure how much of a gap to leave here. 1/8 of an inch overlaps the glass, plus a half is how thick that is, minus the 1/8, and that measurement on both ends has to be perfect, or else this window is not going to fit. So I had to measure 13 5/8 was how big the piece was, and then I had to take 2/8 off, and then I had to make absolutely double check, triple check, quadruple check to make sure it fits just right. So fractions are important to know, especially because if I made this right from edge to edge, there would be no room for the zinc to make it stronger. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
So fractions are very important in school, right?
Learn your fractions. They will come in handy for you for the rest of your life. Okay, I think I've covered all the tools. We talked about something as easy as using a glue stick and tracing paper. We talked about the grinder and the different kind of glass cutters. I think that's all. And I do have 2 rulers over here that I'll show that I measure things with all the time. So All right, the next time, hopefully I'll get done with this one by Thanksgiving, and then the rest of them by Christmas, and then once I get them cut out, then the real work begins, because then I have to hook them all together with solder, and we'll do a video on solder when that comes around.
Fun.
Okay.